Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you're joining us today for our Apply to be a Red, White, and Blue School, a step-by-step webinar for educators. My name is Brian Cofrancesco, and I am the director of the Kid Governor program at the Connecticut Democracy Center. Before we dive in, let me take a moment to quickly tell you a little bit about why we're here. As you probably know, the Red, White, and Blue Schools program recognizes K-12 public and private schools across Connecticut that are going above and beyond in their delivery of civic education. And by participating in this program, schools promote active and engaged membership in their communities and the dedicated teachers and students behind that work and the recognition that they deserve. Red, White, and Blue Schools is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, and we're proud that it is a partnership between the Connecticut Office of the Secretary of the State Department of Education, and the Connecticut Democracy Center in residence at Connecticut's Old State House. If you aren't already on our email list, I hope you will subscribe, and I will drop the link in the chat in just a moment. That'll subscribe you to the latest Red, White, and Blue Schools updates and reminders, particularly as we head towards our application deadline in April. Our main presenter for today is Ariane Orozco, the Director of Outreach and Engagement at the Office of the Connecticut Secretary of the State. Ariane will be walking us through the 2025-2026 application step by step, including this year's theme for the common good. She'll also talk about the evaluation rubric and grade level project ideas. We'll also be hearing from Jennifer Bausch from Stonington Public Schools, who will share some insights about last year's outstanding school, Stonington Middle School. So you won't want to miss any of that, and we're glad you're here for it. My Democracy Center colleague, Jason Pittner, will be monitoring the chat throughout the session, so don't hesitate to drop your questions there as we go, and we'll make sure that they get answered at the end. And with that, we'll get started. So Ariane, take it away.
Hey, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Make sure this is going. Okay. Just making sure this is working properly. Okay. So, hello. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm happy to be with you. Brian has very nicely laid out the plan for today's webinar. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in, starting with the most basic information that you need, of course, which is our deadline. Friday, April 24th is the deadline for submitting your applications anytime before midnight that day. But of course, you can also send submissions before that. We love to get them early. And aside from our deadline, the other important piece of information you may want to know, will there be a cash prize as there has been in the past? And the answer is yes. We're so excited to once again offer $1,000 to our outstanding school. The outstanding school will be presented with a check at the school with representatives of our three partner organizations. And Secretary Thomas has been able to attend the presentations personally for the past 3 years. So we hope that scheduling will work out again that way this year. In terms of our theme, we change our theme each year, the overall theme of the program. This way, there's always a new angle for students who might participate more than once. It keeps it new and interesting for teachers. And we try to make the theme timely, so it corresponds with events happening or ideas that are being talked about in Connecticut or even across the country. This year's theme of For the Common Good is one of the pillars of America 250 Connecticut, the commemoration of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, of course. And of the four pillars of America 250 Connecticut, this is the one that really focuses the most on civic engagement. So we thought it was kind of the most appropriate for Red, White, and Blue Schools. It really focuses on the importance of individuals and communities coming together, working along with government to continue to improve our towns and our state. There are many ways that you can look at this theme, and therefore there are many projects that can probably be applied to this theme. Our goal when we choose a theme is for it to be broad enough to incorporate many different projects and activities that you probably are already doing. We're certainly never trying to create extra work for teachers where you need to conform to a very specific topic. So themes are broad on purpose. With For the Common Good, you might have a project where students explore what the common good actually is in their town or in their school. You might have students look at some recent decisions made locally and how those decisions either benefited or did not benefit them. You might ask students to create a plan of how to work with local groups or local officials to make some changes they want to see or to strengthen their communities in some way. So for an elementary school, as an example, you might study some people who have made a difference in society. Younger students may enjoy hearing stories and learning about an actual person from history, and then thinking about how they themselves can make a difference regarding a certain issue that they care about. For middle schoolers, you might do something similar, but you might look at larger movements and how they developed over time or key moments within those movements. And at the high school level, you might get a little more specific, asking students to immerse themselves in the legislative session that's currently underway, to explore proposed bills and discuss the impact they might have on their lives or on their school or their community. They can actually weigh in on these decisions by contacting their legislators and voicing their opinions. So the most common question we get about the application is what types of projects and activities can I include? And this goes back to what I was saying about how we make an effort to keep the theme broad so it encompasses many different types of projects. And the same goes for the actual projects. We hope that you'll draw on what you're already doing in your classrooms. Our goal is not to give you extra work, but to recognize you for the work that you're already doing. So you're probably already doing something that would qualify, and it might be one kind of major or large project that you think really hits the theme well. Or it could be many individual projects that might be less elaborate, but when all put together, really shows that you've delved into this theme in several different ways. It could be a year-long project. It could be a whole grade working together on something. It might be a school-wide initiative or a district-wide initiative. But the bottom line is that there are many different ways that you can think about this. And if you're in doubt, please don't hesitate to contact us and ask some advice. And if you don't have time to reach out to us, I would encourage you really just to send in the submission. Honestly, it's very rare that we receive a submission that just completely misses the mark. So I encourage you to just apply. So once we review all the submissions and score them, we identify our top school, which is known as the outstanding school. This is the school who received the $1,000 check and is listed on our website as the outstanding red, white, and blue school for the year. Last year, this distinction went to Stonington Middle School, and I'm very happy today that we have Jennifer Bausch with us from Stonington to talk about their submission from last year that made them our outstanding school. So I'm going to stop my sharing now, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Irene. Welcome, everyone. I am very glad to be here. And I have to say first, I'm also very thankful that my middle school, Stonington Middle School, won this award last year. And I love what was just said because, when we first applied, we're like, should we even bother with applying because of what we do? It was just kind of seemed, well, I don't want to say it was common for us. It was just what we were used to. And so I was joking with the panel earlier it was my superintendent who kind of voluntold us to do it. And the teacher who teaches this course, unfortunately, couldn't be here today. But I told him that I would work with him. And I think it's almost like any application for awards or grants. You look at it and right away you're like, oh, it's so much work. But honestly, this whole process, everything's there for you. Looking at the rubric, what we did is we broke down each question, we wrote a few notes, and then we put it away for a day or two and came back and we're like, oh, we have to add this and we do this too. And at the end, we were very pleased with what we put on paper. And then again, pleased that we won the award. So last year, the theme was different. It was Our Government, Our Voices. And with Our Voices, I think if any of you, well, any grade level, but if you think middle school, you really want students to realize that what they have to say is great and important. And you want them to kind of think about how can they get their voice out. And with the government, at the middle school level, we were looking at our curriculum and thinking, we don't really have a lot of civics throughout, and we really need a place for that. We were also looking at our health curriculum. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the new health standards. There's so many that just didn't really fit in our health classes, and so many that talk about safety and not necessarily government, but where do you go to find answers in your town? And then our superintendent at the time was also heavily involved in the community. So we had like these three components. So we created a course. Our middle school doesn't call courses electives. We have what's called an encore, and it's based on student need and also like what's in the classroom or missing from the classroom and interest. And so we created an encore called Stonington Public Safety, Service, and Health. And so it also, with the public there, it includes the government. So again, thinking about the application, it was all about civics and voices and the government. In this course, it's offered every other day. So same group of students every other day. And the teacher and I worked together the first semester, and we just call so many people in our town government, whether it's a select woman, the police department, I'm drawing a blank here, the Human Services, our beautification committee, and the townspeople would come in. The teacher rarely was teaching by himself. He always had someone from the town government in sharing what they do, getting the students actively engaged. The students did things like practice 911 calls, like how would you respond to that? They looked at where the fire districts were in town. They were certified in Stop the Bleed. They learned CPR. They helped design areas in the town that needed some more beautification, and then created the designs that could go into all the flower pots around town. They met with the canine police officers. Every single day was different. I remember one day I went to the middle school and they had the fire truck, but it was the basket and it was being raised up in the driveway. So parents gave permission and the students were up in that basket. So the students were so engaged in it. And the big part is, again, their voices. They were hearing like, okay, we can make an impact. They sat in on some town meetings. They heard like the big issues in town, like in Stonington, one is sidewalks and parking. Like if you've ever been to Mystic, parking's a big deal. So they were coming up with ideas on how they could help with the government. And that was their final project, kind of creating a PSA on like, what can we do? So again, when we knew all that, we knew we did all that. And then we looked at the application and the rubric, and it just all went back to civics. And I'm sure you will hear about that in the rubric. But how is civics involved? How is it inquiry based? And this was all the students coming up with questions too for these townspeople who came in. Their voices, again, how can they make an impact as a middle school student? It was also their individual interests too. Each year we changed the course and like, what did the students want to see more of? And again, the community, this was all 100% community based. And it wasn't something we just created for like a one-off for the application. It's something that we've been doing. So again, the application, we answered each question very quickly and just kept coming back to it. And of course, had people proofread it. And in the end, it wasn't a major ordeal by any means. We just took our time and really thought truthfully about what we did. And I'm proud we did it. We're happy we had the award. The $1,000 is always great. And what we did at the end, we had a ceremony. So we had all the community members who have been involved in the class over the past 3 years were there. It was a whole student assembly, which we do monthly. Secretary Thomas was there, and so was the teacher. So it was a great end of the year presentation as well. So my advice to you, just read through the rubric, read what the questions are asking, and I'm sure what you're doing fits well. And just say what you do, and good luck.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen again. My gosh, now I think everyone can see why you were chosen as the outstanding school for sure. But I will say that you did face some fierce competition. We had some amazing entries last year, so congratulations to you. And if anybody here does have questions for Jennifer, feel free to put them in the chat. And we're just a few minutes away from getting into our Q&A segment. And Jennifer has agreed to stay on for any questions you might have for her. But before we get into Q&A, I'm going to quickly run through the Red, White, and Blue Schools website to be sure that you know what can be found. Make sure to do this. On the website, and where exactly to find the things that you need. So our site is rwbschools.org. That's the best way, easiest way, I think, for you all to find it. And it actually lives on the Connecticut's Old State House website. So that's what you might so don't be confused if you see those logos up at the top. So this is what you will see on the home page of the site. And it's kind of hard to see at the top right below all the three partner logos. That's the navigation bar. It's kind of small on here, but you'll see it. The words are in gray. And right now we're on the home page, which is the link on the left-hand side. So I'm kind of moving through those links. I'll explain what each of the pages has here. So first we get to the annual theme and application. This is probably the most crucial page for you. It's where you're going to want to go when you're ready to apply or when you want to start thinking about your application. So here you'll find a few things. You'll find a blurb about the theme itself. You'll find a link where you can download our handbook that has lots of information about the program. You'll find the rubric that we use when we're scoring the submissions. So you can kind of use that as a guide as you're answering your questions. And then you'll find the application itself, and you'll see it here in two different ways. And I'll go into that a little bit later, but basically you can either submit through a form online, or you can download the application, complete it, kind of in a Word document, and then email that back to us. The next page is going to be some civics resources that we've put together for you. We've tried to compile some sample websites, books, and other programs that might be helpful to you in your classroom. And the next next page is going to be events. So this is where you'll find any upcoming webinars or events associated with Red, White, and Blue schools. And you'll also find the recordings of previous webinars. So if, for example, if you want to come back to this webinar, you'll be able to find it or a link to it on this page of the website. Then we get into the next page is our FAQs, frequently asked questions page, another area of the site where you can go for some quick answers to questions that you might have. And then this is a very popular page on our website. It's where you can find not only a list of the previous outstanding schools and schools of distinction, but you'll also find links to their actual submissions. So these are great examples of projects and activities that have obviously brought these schools to the outstanding schools designation. So I think that they might help give you some ideas for your own classrooms. So the application, I showed you where to find the application on the website, and I explained that you can either fill in the form or you can download the application, complete it, and then email it to us. And aside from the application itself, you might have some supplemental materials, which can either be uploaded to the form if you're using the form, or it can be emailed with the application if you're sending it by email. So those materials might include photos, graphics, videos, maybe website links. But if you have a lot of materials and you're unsure how to send us everything, just email us and we'll figure out a way, the best way. So we'll go through the application kind of quickly, just to be sure that you can see what's on it and you kind of understand some of the details here. If we start off by asking for some basic information at the top here, you see that we ask how you're submitting, whether it's for a whole school district, one school, a grade level, a combination of classes, or just one classroom. So there are many different ways to think about your submission, and you can choose any of these. We love to see kind of a combination of classes working together or a whole grade level, but certainly, just one individual class also works. Next up, we ask for an executive summary of what you're submitting, and we give you, some questions here that can guide you as you're writing your executive summary. And then we get into the individual questions that really correspond to the rubrics. So this is where looking at the rubrics will help you. So we start with how the activities align with the social studies standards, how the activities promote the voices of many different people from different entities, how the activities are relevant to individual students, how the activities show that a whole community might be impacted. Then we ask you to explain why you chose the presentation format that you did. So there are many different ways to present, and you might have chosen music or poetry, letters, posters, videos, creating an app or a website, something, digital. And we're asking in this area to just explain why you thought that this was the best way to capture the theme. And then lastly, as I mentioned earlier, we provide space for you to include any supplemental materials that you'd like. And here we are with the rubric. So the rubric This is kind of a condensed version for this webinar purpose. But you can see here that, questions 1 through 5, what I just kind of went through really correspond to the rubric. And we ask you to always keep in mind the theme for the common good. So when you're going through and answering these questions, I would always just go back to that theme. Like, how does what we're doing correspond to the theme? The other thing that we love to see is the projects being student led. So talking about the students' involvement in the projects, how their thoughts and ideas are leading the projects. And we also love to see different people working together. So whether it's students working together from different classrooms or within their class, or students working with outside community groups or elected officials. So, you can really show that in different ways. But we love to see when students either bring in, people from outside of the school into their classrooms, or they go out into the community and work with people outside of the school itself. So the next is, this is just a sample of the handbook I mentioned earlier. On the same page where we have the rubrics and the application, we also have a great handbook that really kind of encompasses everything that we're talking about here. So if you have this webinar as a resource you can go back to, but you also have a really great handbook if you prefer to kind of read through everything. And that's pretty much it for today. Before we get into our Q&A segment, a reminder about the deadline, April 24th. So you have pretty much a full month to go and think about what projects you might want to include. info@rwbschools.org. This is our email address. Do not hesitate to email us about really, anything, whether it's a question about your projects, a question about how to apply, the application process, whatever, any questions at all, please do send to us. I think I'm going to stop sharing and we'll see if we've had any questions so far.
Yeah, so one question that came up was, can teachers from non-social studies subjects like ELA, science, or math submit a project?
Yes, and that's a great question, and I love to hear that because we really think of civics as something that we encounter in our daily lives in all subjects. And I really hesitate to even kind of focus only on social studies or on history or government classes, because I think it's important for students to think about it in many different aspects of their lives. So absolutely, we encourage that.
Yeah. And then another good one was in regards to evidence, so like submitting materials. How much evidence do we need to include? Is there a minimum or a maximum? And then what kind of evidence tends to make like the strongest application?
And actually, I saw that Jennifer might have wanted to weigh in on the last topic because it was exactly what I think, like your example is exactly what they're talking about with health.
Right. And so the teacher who taught that course is actually a phys ed health teacher. And so there were health standards. And again, it was an encore, so it wasn't a true phys ed or social studies class, but we use a lot of the social studies, civic standards, and definitely the inquiry base. So there was a phys ed teacher that got that.
Yep. I love that. And I'm sorry, you're asking about evidence. Can you repeat that last question again?
Yeah, of course. How much evidence do we need to include? Is there a minimum or a maximum? And then what kind of evidence tends to make the strongest applications?
Definitely no minimum or maximum. I would say, whatever you think will help us as people who, are reading through applications and haven't probably, never encountered this particular project that you've done. So whatever you think will help us understand it better. Um, I think, if you're talking about an event or, something that you can show in photos, I think photos are definitely helpful. We've had people submit copies of like PowerPoint presentations. If the students had to make presentations to somebody, they've incorporated those actual presentations, which was helpful to see what the students put together. Um, so certainly, seeing visually, if there is that visual component, I think is helpful to kind of bring it to life for us. But we recognize that's not always possible. The projects differ. So I think whatever you think helps explain the project the best you know, is what works.
Yeah, and when it comes to being recognized as like a red, white, and blue school, obviously there's outstanding school, and then there's the schools of distinction. But for like just a regular like red, white, and blue recognition, do people need a score of a 2 or higher on all 5 rubric categories to be recognized, or is there like a minimum overall score?
There's not really, I wouldn't say that there's a minimum score. I think that what we've seen is the applications that have come through um have either been, they've either checked the boxes of at least, that minimum kind of like the average, or they just have not at all. And the ones that have not at all have been very few, maybe a couple over the past few years. So, um, yes, I would just say I would encourage everybody, as I said earlier, to apply because I bet that you're doing the work that we want to recognize.
Yeah, and that kind of goes hand in hand with another question we received, which was, is there a limit to how many schools can be recognized, or does every qualifying school receive a certificate? You kind of touched on the latter of that question, but
Yeah, and every school who qualifies definitely gets recognized as a red, white, and blue school. We have the outstanding school, and then we also typically either have one or two schools of distinction. And that depends on, all the schools that have submitted that particular year and what those scores end up being in the end when we look at all of them. So if, you know, after the top ranking school, if there are two that are kind of, neck and neck where they both have the same strong score, we'll have two schools of distinction um, kind of after that outstanding school.
yeah. And one last question I think I want to touch on or kind of mention is one that kind of goes hand in hand with what Jennifer was talking about earlier in regards to her project at Stonington Middle School. Um, but do people need to create like a specific project just for red, white, and blue schools, or can they submit projects that were started, you know, ahead of time or years prior?
No, we really want to recognize the work that is already being done, and we know that there's such good work being, or that you all are doing. So our goal is absolutely not to be creating more work for teachers. Um, Certainly, if we have seen actually some projects where it's kind of like it's a project that has gone beyond a year. So as long as you can show what work has been done within this school year in that project, and that it, it applies and it applies to the theme, then that works, certainly, even if it's a multi-year project. But you know, we're looking at this as work that has been done over the course of the school year. So it could have been back in September or back around election time, back in November, or it could be something you're doing now. So yeah, it's really meant to be flexible in order to apply to as many projects as possible.
I don't think that I missed any other questions that were written in. Um,
Okay.
Brian, if you see any, Ariana, if you see any, make sure to let me know.
Or, and I would just ask Brian and Jennifer if you all think anything was missed in what we've talked about so far today.
No, I just recommend that everyone fills out the application.
Yeah, I don't think anything missed. I just want to, elevate that point a lot. Really, if you are unsure, if you think you'll qualify, we really want to recognize the work that's being done. So it's not meant to create the extra work, as Ariane said. So if you have any thought that, oh, maybe this project or this effort that we do would qualify, by all means, take some time, fill out the application. We really want to hear about the work that's being done.
Yep. Yep. And along with what, Brian is at the Connecticut Democracy Center, as is Jason, and they run the Kid Governor program. There's History Day. These are all examples of programs that have been part of submissions to us for Red, White, and Blue Schools. So, if you're on this webinar, you might already be familiar, might already be doing Kid Governor, or have students working on History Day, or something like that. So just throwing out some more examples of great programs that would also apply for Red, White, and Blue Schools, certainly. All right. Well, I think we can wrap up. I want to thank everybody for attending. Thank you, Jennifer, Brian, and Jason. And you can look for this webinar if you need to on the Red, White, and Blue Schools site.
Well, thank you, Ariane, for putting together that presentation and for sharing all that with us. I'm going to share Ariane's last slide just one more time as a reminder that the deadline is on April 24th. You can visit rwbschools.org, or you can email us at info@rwbschools.org if you have any questions. And we'd love to see as many Connecticut schools as possible be recognized this year as a red, white, and blue school. And we hope your school will be one of them. So good luck. Thank you again for joining us. And we look forward to receiving your applications.